Welcome to Barista Confessions, a podcast where you learn what your favorite barista thinks about you, the customer. My name is David, host of the show, and in each episode we bring real stories shared by real baristas who are tired of putting up with your bullshit. So please, grab a seat, pour yourself some coffee, because today's story is going to be a crazy one. Hey guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of Barista Confessions. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. No, I'm not going to be changing the format because this is literally the third episode of the series. What I'm going to be doing, instead of talking about the history of a beverage like I did in the last podcast with cappuccinos, I'm going to be talking about something that almost every business has, and that is a return policy. Now, for those of you who have never returned an item before, and I highly doubt that because the internet has made it really easy to buy stuff and return stuff. Most companies actually will let you return stuff that you bought online at their brick and mortar locations. So let's say, for example, that you bought something at bestbuy.com, you could go ahead and return it at their in-store locations. But they're a great way to return an item that either you impulsively bought or bought thinking you need it and you don't really use it. Most businesses have a set number of days that you can return the item. So sometimes it could be a week, 2 weeks, up to a full month. The month being very, very generous, but the typical standard that I've seen nowadays is about 15 days, maybe a little more if they have like some sort of rewards program or membership that is exclusive to that location. You are often required to have a receipt to prove that you purchased it at that location, and that way they could verify the purchase date. So if it's past that allotted time frame, then they may or may not exchange it or return it because it's already past the date. But most cases they will try to make an exception because they want to have good customer service and return business from you. Otherwise, if you don't have the receipt, you could also exchange it. Let's say if it was a gift for Christmas and they didn't give you a gift receipt, you could say, hey, I got this as a gift. Can I exchange it for something else? And most of the time, companies will let you do that as well. Either exchange it for a different item or you could get store credit and you could go buy something else. But the big one is generally the item needs to be in resellable condition because they do plan to resell it to make some money off of it, obviously, because you bought it. Let's say it was a $200 item. They're giving you that $200 back. They already lost that money, so they want to sell it again. But obviously, if it's damaged or heavily used, let's say like a cup or a tumbler or something that could be damaged by using it a lot, then they're not going to accept it because they can't sell it in that condition. It's like, you go and buy something that you think is brand new and then you open the box and it's like, completely destroyed or damaged. So it's like, okay. So that leads us to today's story, which is return policy. A few years ago, I was working at Siren's Coffee, and I was a supervisor. So I had to deal with a lot of returns from customers, and most of them were pretty easy, straightforward. They had the receipt to prove the purchase was at that location, and I would exchange it or give them their money back. No questions asked. As long as they had that little piece of paper, I was good. If they didn't, I would offer store credit. So I was closing that night. And I had a customer come in with a tumbler, and he says that he wanted to return the item because it had this really funky smell. And he showed it to me, and from the outside, it looked like it was really well maintained. But upon opening it, and these are the tumblers that are the stainless steel, or at least most companies say they're stainless steel. But on the inside, it was very scratched up, but there was a lot of brown stains from assuming that he would let it sit with coffee for long periods of time. And I told him, like, okay, well, the item seems like it's been heavily used, but do you happen to have the receipt so I could verify the purchase date and then I could talk to my boss and see what we could do here to help you out? Generally, I'm okay with returning items, and most of these establishments, like cafes, want to please the customer because it's all about the customer experience. And so they're willing to go above and beyond. Even if the item may or may not be in resellable condition, they're willing to compromise. And so he said that the reason he wanted to return it because it was that funky smell and that he was disappointed with the quality of the tumbler. And I told him, well, I asked him, do you happen to have the receipt? Because without the receipt, I can't process anything. I won't be able to check anything on the computer, and I won't be able to refund you your money. And of course, he got very upset because it's like, well, why do I need the receipt to return something I fucking bought here? I'm a regular here. It's like, I understand that, but it's company policy. Again, that's why it's called policy, that we require a receipt for any exchanges or refunds. Otherwise, I would have to give you store credit and I can't physically give you cash. So he makes a big scene, like most of the customers in these stories. And so he leaves. I was like, okay, whatever, it's not going to ruin my night. And so I carry on. And a few hours later, before I start closing up, he shows up again with a stack of receipts. And he told me, oh, I have the receipt for the item. And so it's literally about, I'm going to guess here, maybe about 30 receipts all stapled together. I don't know how a staple could crunch through all those receipts. And the very, very first one was for the tumbler that he had. And I checked the date on it, and it was from 6 months prior to when he tried to return it. And I told him, like, I'm sorry, sir, but I won't be able to return the item or give you your money back because it was purchased 6 months ago. And of course, he got mad. He's like, well, you fucking said that you needed the goddamn receipt, and I have the receipt here, so I want my money back. And I told him, I understand that, but there's a limit to how many days we are allowed to accept an item. In this case, at Siren's Coffee, it's 30 days, which is very generous. And I told him, well, this is from 6 months ago, so you're 5 months too late. And I was being very calm, cool, and collected. I wasn't really getting upset about the whole thing because, he was clearly pissed off. I just didn't give a shit, like, most of the time. And I told him I can't exchange the item because of this stipulation. And he's like, well, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, you told me this, and that, and now you're going back on your words. I'm like, I told you that you needed the receipt to start the refund, and I needed the receipt to verify the purchase date. So I don't know where you got those two things mixed up. And then he started getting really pissed off. A couple of my customers that were already inside the lobby left because they didn't want to, hear this guy yelling to the top of the lungs. My other barista was freaking out as well. And I told him, look, sir, you don't need to make a big deal about this whole thing. You don't need to make a big scene about it. And he's like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, I want my money back. And I told him, I can't return something that you heavily use because this is a heavily used item and it has to be in resellable condition. I could go print out the policy if you want to read it, which I didn't end up doing because I kind of shut him up for a few seconds. And he's like, well, I want my fucking money back or I'm going to call corporate. I'm like, you could call corporate and they could try to figure out the situation as far as whether or not they want to exchange the item. Because sometimes in these companies, the corporation will make the exception, but the customer has to call and tell them what's going on. And I told him, like, look, you need to just calm down. There's no need to get disappointed in this. I told him, it's just policy and procedure. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. And it's like, you need to stop telling me to look. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, really? Like, look at what? Like, I told you to look, you need to chill the fuck out. Or look that the paper states that this was purchased 6 months ago. Or to look at the policy. And he's like, just stop saying look. And I was like, look, you need to chill the fuck out. I was like, stop saying look. I'm like, look, sir, if you're going to be making a big deal about this whole thing, you should just step outside, or I could call the police and have you escorted off the premises because you're starting to become verbally abusive and violent. And, we don't tolerate that here. And he's like, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. And like, fuck you and fuck this company. And stop telling me to say look. I'm like, look, sir, the exit's over there. Please. Have a great night. And he's like, I'm going to call corporate. I'm like, you could go ahead and call them. Here's my name, David. Here's the phone number. And go for it. And he's like, oh, well, you just had to have the last word, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, I do. Because it's 10 o'clock and we're closed now. So have a great night. So let's recap. Companies have return policies for a reason. To exchange an item that you purchased or let's say was damaged or you just didn't flat out use, and most companies give you anywhere from a week to 4 weeks to return the item. You're required to have the receipt to prove that you purchased the item and be eligible for the full refund, otherwise you'll get store credit. And the item has to be in a resellable condition. And obviously if it's really heavily used or damaged, they're not going to take it back. It's your problem now. Clearly, this guy was trying to rip us off, and it really pisses me the fuck off when customers try to pull this shit because they're just being so damn cheap. Yes, stuff gets worn out over time, because you use it a lot. And granted, the price on that tumbler was only $10. He could easily purchase another one. So customers, hear me out. If you do plan to return an item, whether it be a tumbler or something that you purchased at a cafe, always make sure you have the receipt and always ask what the return policy is. That way, if you purchase the item, you know when to return it. Well, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go ahead and subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review. It'll really help us out a lot. Follow us on social media, #Barista Confessions. And remember, to my fellow baristas, stay frothy. See you guys next time.